What happens when one of television's most respected actors finally snaps live in front of millions? Tonight, we're revisiting a late-night moment so explosive it left audiences stunned and social media in chaos. Bob Odenkirk, the brilliant mind behind Saul Goodman and decades of comedy gold, found himself locked in a confrontation that ended with him walking off stage mid-interview. If you've ever wondered how quickly a conversation can unravel when pride and misrepresentation collide, stay with me. The Tonight Show studio was buzzing with its usual energy. Bob had come to promote his latest project. Nothing seemed unusual until the cameras rolled. Jimmy Fallon bounded onto the stage with his trademark grin, brimming with enthusiasm. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the incredible Bob Odenkirk." He cheered, gesturing toward the entrance. Bob walked out, smiling politely as the crowd applauded. But anyone who knew him well might have noticed something was off. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes, his body language more guarded than usual. He settled into the guest chair as Jimmy greeted him with an almost overzealous handshake. "Bob, great to see you, man. Thanks for being here tonight." "Thanks for having me, Jimmy," Bob replied, and measured his tone, a stark contrast to Fallon's high energy. "Welcome." Then came the question that shifted everything. Jimmy leaned forward, mischief flashing in his eyes. "So Bob, I heard you've got some strong opinions about where comedy's heading these days. Care to share with the audience?" It sounded harmless, but Bob's expression changed. "Well, comedy, like any art form, goes through phases. Some good, some not so much." Jimmy pushed harder. "Come on, Bob, I heard you were pretty critical of younger comedians. Something about them not paying their dues." A pause. The air in the studio seemed to thicken. Bob's jaw tightened. "I think there's some confusion there. Jimmy, I've always supported new talent. One mentor, younger performers, all the time." But Fallon wasn't backing down. "Didn't you say in Entertainment Weekly that a lot of today's comedians are just chasing social media fame instead of real craft?" Bob's eyes narrowed. "I never gave Entertainment Weekly that interview." "Where exactly did you get this information?" The audience shifted uneasily. Jimmy faltered, just for a moment, before recovering. "Maybe it was another outlet. But you do have thoughts about the state of comedy, right?" Bob's tone sharpened. "I'm happy to discuss my actual opinions, but I won't respond to things I never said." Jimmy laughed, but it came out forced. "Hey, relax, Bob, we're just having fun here." "Defensive," Bob shot back, his voice edged with steel. "I'm not being defensive, I'm being accurate." "There's a difference," the audience murmured. The tension was undeniable now. Jimmy tried to wave it off. "Look, Bob, this is late night. We're here to have fun." "Fun is fine," Bob said, leaning forward, eyes locked on Fallon, "but not when it comes at the cost of putting false words in my mouth. That's not fun, it's careless. And careless statements can do real damage in this industry. If I..." Smile faltered completely. "Bob, I think you're overreacting." "Overreacting?" Bob's voice rose. "You just accused me of trashing young comedians based on an interview that doesn't exist. When I correct you, you call me defensive. Now I'm overreacting. That's not conversation. Jimmy, that's disrespect." Camera operators zoomed in, capturing every flicker of frustration across Bob's face. The control room knew this wasn't an ordinary exchange. Bob didn't let up. "Tell me, did you or your producers actually prepare for this interview? Or did you just decide to wing it and hope something controversial stuck?" The room froze. Jimmy's trademark grin was gone, replaced with visible discomfort. "Maybe we should just talk about your new project." "No, Jimmy," Bob cut him off. "We're not moving on. We need to acknowledge what just happened." The Tonight Show studio, usually filled with laughter, had gone silent. Even the audience strained to clap, cheer, and laugh on cue in uneasy stillness. Everyone in that room knew they were witnessing something raw, something unscripted, and something that had already spiraled far beyond control. Jimmy Fallon, a host who had built his entire brand on keeping things playful and unthreatening, suddenly found himself in deep waters. Across from him sat Bob Odenkirk, collected but clearly fed up. "Bob, look, I'm sorry if there was some miscommunication," Jimmy said, trying to reel the conversation back under control. "Maybe my team pulled some bad info." "Bad info?" Bob repeated, incredulous. "Jimmy, you've spent the last 5 minutes pushing me to defend positions I never took, based on interviews I never gave. That's not miscommunication, that's irresponsible." The studio's energy shifted. Jimmy's hands fidgeted nervously on his desk, a subtle tell his longtime viewers would recognize. "Come on, Bob, stuff like this happens in interviews. All the time, we're just trying to spark an interesting conversation." "Interesting conversation?" Bob shook his head slowly. "Do you even understand the difference between an honest conversation and ambush journalism? Because what you just did falls firmly in the latter category." The cameras zoomed tighter. In the control room, producers debated cutting to commercial, but the raw tension was too magnetic to interrupt. "Bob, I think you're blowing this way out of proportion," Jimmy said, his tone shifting defensive. "I was just asking questions." "No," Bob snapped, leaning forward. You were asking loaded questions built on fabricated premises. There's a world of difference, and the fact that you don't grasp that when interviewing is your job is deeply concerning. Jimmy's face flushed. The easygoing mask of the Tonight Show host had slipped. I don't know what your problem is tonight, but you're being incredibly hostile for no reason. No reason. For the first time, Bob's voice rose, frustration breaking through his composure. Jimmy, I raise legitimate concerns about journalistic integrity, and you spin that as hostility. Do you even hear yourself? Jimmy let out a sharp, brittle laugh. Journalistic integrity. Bob, this is a comedy show. We're not doing investigative reporting here. That line was the breaking point. Bob stood abruptly, towering over the seated host, his voice cut through the stunned silence of the room. A comedy show. Sure, but having a stage built on jokes doesn't excuse you from basic professional standards. Millions watch this program. What you say matters. Bob, please sit down, Jimmy urged, genuine unease creeping into his voice as he realized how far things had spiraled. No, Jimmy, I won't, Bob replied firmly, controlled anger lacing every word. Because the audience deserves to know what just happened. You invited me here under the pretense of promoting my work, then tried to engineer controversy with lies. That's not entertainment, that's exploitation. The crowd was dead silent. This wasn't the Tonight Show they'd expected. You want to know what I really think about comedy today? Bob's voice carried to every corner of the studio. It's being poisoned by exactly this mindset, the idea that you can throw out half-truths, misquotes, and cheap drama just to keep people watching. And you, Jimmy, are feeding it. Fallon's composure was cracking. Bob, I think you're misunderstanding. No? Bob cut him off. There's no misunderstanding. This was a deliberate attempt to manufacture drama at my expense. And when I called it out, instead of owning up, you doubled down. I did apologize, Jimmy insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. You offered a deflection. Bob countered, eyes locked on him. You said maybe there was miscommunication. Maybe bad research. That's not accountability, that's avoidance. The air in the studio was electric, thick with silence. Crew members exchanged uncertain glances. Nobody had a playbook for what was unfolding. Bob leaned in slightly, his voice dropping lower, sharper. Tell me something, Jimmy. Bob's voice softened back to a conversational level, which only made his words cut deeper. Tell me something, Jimmy. How would you feel if you went on someone else's show and they spent the entire interview trying to make you defend things you never said, never did? Jimmy fell silent, fumbling for words. Bob didn't let up. I'm waiting, Jimmy, because I think everyone here would love to hear your answer. Jimmy finally muttered, almost under his breath. I'd probably be upset. You'd be upset, Bob repeated firmly. And you'd have every right to be upset, wouldn't you? Yes, Jimmy admitted, his voice barely audible. So why is it unreasonable when I'm upset? Bob pressed. Why am I painted as hostile for having the same reaction you just confessed you'd have? Jimmy had no answer. His silence filled the room more powerfully than any words could. Bob exhaled, his tone shifting, less angry now, almost wary. You know what the truly disappointing part is, Jimmy? I've been in this business over 30 years. I've done hundreds of interviews, some were sloppy, some unprepared, some just awkward, but never have I been on a show where the host deliberately misrepresented my views, then turned the blame on me when I pushed back. The weight of those words settled over the studio like a storm cloud. Jimmy Fallon, once the king of late-night charm, suddenly looked diminished, smaller, shaken, stripped of his usual armor of jokes and smiles. The audience sat frozen, caught between disbelief and discomfort. Bob remained standing beside his chair, torn between walking out and driving the point home. Jimmy finally spoke, his voice shaky. Bob, I really think we should just try to work this out. Maybe we can start over. Bob stared at him, disappointment written across his face. Start over, Jimmy, this isn't a video game. You can reset. Do you honestly think you can just erase what just happened? I'm just trying to make this right, Jimmy pleaded, desperation bleeding into his tone. You want to make this right. Bob's words were measured, razor sharp. Then stop glossing over it. Stop deflecting. Actually acknowledge what went wrong. Jimmy shifted uncomfortably. I already said, maybe there was some miscommunication. There it is again, Bob said, shaking his head. Maybe. Jimmy, do you even believe that? Or are you just hoping if you repeat it enough, people will accept it as the truth? The cameras caught every beat, every flicker of discomfort. Across living rooms in America, viewers leaned forward, riveted by a confrontation they'd never seen before on late-night television. Bob, I don't know. What do you want me to say? Jimmy finally burst out, frustration edging through. I want the truth, Bob said firmly. Either your research team handed you false information, which is a serious failure on their part, or you decided to invent controversy yourself, which is a serious failure on your part. Which is it? Jimmy froze. The silence stretched, long and heavy. Finally, he muttered, I think maybe there was some confusion in the prep process. Confusion, Bob repeated flatly. Jimmy, listen to yourself. You're a professional interviewer with a full team behind you. Either they fed you falsehoods, or you chose to deliver them. There's no magical middle ground called confusion. It's one or the other. The silence that followed was suffocating. Fallon looked out toward the audience, almost as if hoping someone might rescue him. No one did. Bob shook his head slowly, his voice dropping into finality. You know what, Jimmy? I think I have my answer. The fact that you can't give a straight one tells me everything I need to know about how seriously you take this job. Jimmy opened his mouth. Desperate now. Bob, please asterisk. Jimmy reached out slightly, almost as if he could physically keep Bob from leaving. Please, he began, his voice cracking. Please, what, Jimmy? Bob cut in, his tone steady but edged. With steel, please pretend this didn't happen. Please go along with whatever version of events makes you look better. Please help turn this mess into content for your show. Bob shook his head, firm and unyielding. I've spent my entire career building a reputation on honesty and integrity. I'm not about to compromise that just to pull you out of a situation you created. Jimmy's face drained of color. I never asked you to compromise anything. Yep, asked me to defend statements I never made, Bob shot back. You asked me to play along with a conversation built on false premises, and when I refused, you told me I was overreacting. That's asking me to compromise my integrity, Jimmy. The crew hovered in uneasy limbo, clearly receiving conflicting signals from the control room. Some whispered, cut to commercial. Others motioned to let it keep rolling. No one had ever navigated territory like this before. Jimmy, let me give you some advice. Bob continued, his voice shifting into something quieter, almost paternal. This industry is built on trust. Trust between performers and audiences, between guests and hosts, between colleagues. Tonight, that trust was broken, and the way you've handled it has only made the damage worse. Jimmy swallowed hard. Bob, I'm really sorry this happened. For the first time, the apology sounded raw, unpolished, genuine. I believe you're sorry, Jimmy, Bob said evenly. But being sorry after the fact doesn't erase the damage, and it doesn't fix the deeper issue that led us here. Jimmy blinked, confused. What deeper issue? The issue, Bob explained, is that you seem to think your job is to create entertainment at any cost, even if it means sacrificing your guest's reputation or pushing false narratives. That's not interviewing. That's exploitation. The word landed like a slap across the room. Jimmy flinched. That's not fair, he muttered, isn't it? Bob pressed. You invited me here under false pretenses, tried to bait me with fabricated controversies, and when I pushed back, you made me out to be the problem. How exactly is that not exploitation? Jimmy had no answer. His silence said more than anything he could have mustered. Bob took a deep breath, turned toward the cameras, and spoke directly to the millions watching at home. I came here tonight, excited to talk about my work, to share a real conversation. That's not what happened, and I think the audience deserves to understand why. Facing Jimmy one last time, Bob added, I hope you take this as a lesson. I hope you look hard at how your show operates and make some changes, because if you don't, this won't be the last time you end up in this position. With that, Bob Odenkirk rose and walked steadily toward the edge of the stage. The cameras followed him as the audience sat frozen, breaths held. Jimmy tried one last desperate plea. Bob, wait. But Bob didn't turn back. At the curtain, he paused, gave the audience a small, respectful nod, and disappeared backstage. Jimmy remained alone at his desk, the weight of what had just happened etched across his face. The studio was silent, the audience unsure whether to clap, gasp, or simply sit in stunned disbelief. That was over. A moment of live television no one would ever forget. Bob Odenkirk's walk-off wasn't just about a bad interview, it was about integrity, standards, and accountability on one of the biggest stages in late-night TV. What do you think? Did Bob do the right thing by leaving, or should he have tried to resolve it on air? Subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories, and tell me in the comments what you would have done if you were in Bob's shoes.